welcome back to another template design walkthrough. This design is called Funkadelic. So this one is interesting in the sense that I've included seven different background design options within one file here. So it makes it fun to be able to try different things pretty quickly by dropping subjects into different groups here. But we're going to take a look at the options in this. There's a lot of layers in this one, of course, because there's 7 different options in here. But we're going to take a look, and most of these are like a lot of shape layers and things. So this one's designed to be a little more fun and funky and like really kind of more attention grabbing than maybe some others you're used to. So it could be some really cool senior banners and things to really stand out. Not going to be for everyone. That's okay. But for those that enjoy it, I can't wait to see what you make with it. So let's jump in here to our layer stack. Starting at the top, as usual, is our color grading layers, adding a little bit of color contrast into the finished image. You could expand this, you could turn these layers on and off, change opacities, whatever, to make it look the way that you would like it to. Directly below that, these are our facial highlight boost layers. The top one is preset for darker skin tones. The bottom one is for lighter skin tones. And so it's as easy as just painting, selecting the mask, making sure it's highlighted, painting on over like the face with a white brush is what I typically do, just to pop those highlights on the face, and then adjust your opacity to get the balance that you'd like. All right, so jumping on down here, starting up with option 7 is turned on here. So this is the overall look of this design. Again, kind of funky, a little bit old school on this one, a little throwbacky type of feel here. If we expand this group, we're going to see our layers for this specific design option. So we got some, simple text in here. On the product page, as always, is links back to the text I've used for the samples as I mock these up. So if you want to grab those same ones, you can do those from the links on the product page. So some simple text here. Year again is text changed just by double clicking and typing. Double click. We could put a new year there and then apply that. So very easy to change the text. More text for the name at the bottom here. And then we just start getting into some shapes to create these different kind of funky styles. So some circle shapes in here. Because these are shape layers, you can just double click and just punch in a new color here. You could select it from your background, from another element, from a jersey or something like that, or you could come select your own. So every one of these that are a shape layer are easily changed in that exact same way. All right, so very easy to set those colors. Now, to keep it uniform, what I do recommend is if you pick a color, so if you come in and you wanted to pick like this, chartreusey type color, I would copy this hex value here, Command or Control C, and then just hit every one of these objects to update them so that they all match perfectly. So then there'd be some more down here that you could set. So on and so forth. I just think it looks a lot nicer if those are all set to the exact same value. All right, so there's some circle shapes. Next, we're going to get into a group here. You see all these layers have these arrows clipped down to our subject group. All right, so let's look at the subject group first, which here marked in red. So this place subject in this group. You can see we got a subject we're going to turn on in just a second there. But subject right here is where you want to place it inside this group, because as you can see, there is some masking happening on this group. All right, if we hold Alt or Option and click on the mask, this is the shape of that mask. And you'll see what that's doing in just a second. But then clip to that, we have some layers that are going to affect the subject. So starting here, working our way up, this one's just going to turn them black and white. This one's doing some brightness contrast adjustment. This is doing some punchier brightness and contrast adjustment. This is going to do some color influence, which you'll see in just a minute, and some highlight color control. So all these affect the subject. All right, so we'll turn that subject on just a second, take a look how those are operating. But let's look at the rest of the layers in this option. So more shapes basically through the rest of this. So you got these half circle shapes, and these can all be moved around. You could put these in any orientation or pattern design that you want. But all of these shape, all the way down to the background layer, and then that can easily be changed into whatever color you would like as well with a simple color picker. Okay? So that's kind of the basis layout for this, is just all these shapes and the subject in the middle. So let's open this up. Let's turn our subject on. So this is the subject I have dropped in. You can see because of the masking, she's getting masked along the shape of this bottom as a nice transition point, so it's not, seeing any legs stick out. If we hit shift here, you would see the whole body sticking out, so it looks much cooler with the mask on there. All right, so looking at these options that are clipped to this subject layer here. So again, this one would turn the subject black and white. Now there's some color cast happening because of these other layers, so let's turn those off. All right, so there's just that true black and white conversion. So there's our subject without all of these others applied, so just as normal. So there's a black and white conversion. Above that, this is our brightness and contrast adjustments. That's the first one that's really brightening things up and adding some contrast in. Then we have another one that's just punching things up even more. And a lot of these options, I think if you're doing a black and white, it looks really cool if it's punchier and more contrasty. So that's why I added, so you could pick different levels of what you like the look of. And then here's that subject color influence. Now I think, basically what this is doing is adding a color cast over the subject. I think it looks really cool if the black and white is off, personally. And you can see going from like the regular colors that came in, this is just kind of adding like a little bit of a color wash, because you can see it's set to color blend mode. Right now it's preset to 23% opacity, and you could turn that up and down based on how strong you wanted that color cast to be. I think it looks kind of cool with just that subtle color cast. So if you were working with somebody with, maybe like green in their uniform or blue, you could come up and you could, basically pick the color from the uniform and influence their color to help match, the whole look of that design. So that's what that's about. And then at the top, this highlight color control, because you're going to see this more than once in this design. If we turn that on, you can see what that's doing is it's bringing all of the highlight values down to more closely match the background. Okay, so again, you could leave that off. And it's going to be different, for everybody's different subjects, different ways that you shoot, different ways that you light. You may or may not want to use these layers, and that's fine. That's why they're in here to be easily turned on and off. You can see what I've done is I've just kind of come in and picked a similar color to the background color. And then I actually darkened and, kind of desaturated a little bit. Just to, again, bring those down so it kind of feels more cohesive in the whole design there. All right, so that's what's happening, because you're going to see a lot of these similar layers in each of these groups. So I want to be sure to cover what all of these are doing, so you know that you can turn things on or off to make your own custom looks and things on these. Okay, so let's go up, let's collapse this one, and let's take a look at the next one. So here's the next option. So a little super funky one. To me, this has like a cool, like almost motocross type of feel to it. I think it's super cool. So let's expand it. We're going to take a look, starting right at the top. So the subject's going to be right at the top on this one. So here's our subject group. All right, so we'll just go ahead and turn our subject on. So you could move your subject around anywhere in here, resize as needed. I think it looks pretty cool right there. And then you can see, just as before, we have some similar options. So here's that black and white conversion. And you can see with the black and white off, these other contrast and brightness adjustments are a little too much. Like it gets too punchy. So you might want to turn those down if you're going for like a color one and trying to match some of the background colors. I do think for black and white, though, it looks a lot better punched up like that. And then there's that highlight control again. You can see instead of going with a very, natural bright highlight that's happening from these punchy layers, that highlight control, it's actually not true white. You can see it's a little bit darker than white with a slight bit of color in it, and that's just toning, the overall brightness and highlights down just a little bit, which I think looks nicer. So I just think, in general, this makes a really cool, modern, vibey type of funky look to it. So again, I think it looks super cool myself. But below that subject layer, we have some pattern texture here. So you can see as I turn that off and on, it's really showing up in the darker areas. And then there's just some color picker layer here that's attached to that. So if you wanted to change the color of that, you could come in and pick it. You could make it white or any other color very easily. Below that is our text here. So this is the text running across the bottom. The name text I've got just added over here to the side, and then there's a year, all very easily updated. And then you see some shapes. So this is that block shape. Again, any kind of shape, you could come in and pick a new color. So if you wanted to come customize these background colors into anything that you wanted, you could do that very simply. Here's a shape here on this side. Again, this one has this blocking attached to it, which is creating this little block clipped inside this layer. So that's why it's clipped there. But again, these are all very easy to come in and customize and change the colors of, for whatever look that you're going for. And then just more shapes. Best way I recommend getting in here to see what's what is just turn a layer on and off and see what's turning on and off in the design. That'll tell you exactly which piece you're working with, because there are a lot of shape layers to create this look, but they can all be completely colored and customized to make different looks. Like, I think it looks pretty cool even if these were all that bright green color. So you can see you can come set those, and I think that looks super cool as well. We have another layer of texture that's happening, and really you can see it over the lighter portions of some of this. Another simple color picker here. So if you wanted to make that black or different shades, again, you could easily do that as well. And that's, again, affecting that darker type of patterned texture in here. So this is that middle block, which is set up as a shape. So if you wanted to change the color of that whole block, that can easily be done too. And then here's your upper block. Again, could easily change that one. Looks kind of cool making that black. And then there's a left and right block down here to set these colors as well. So again, just double click on the layer thumbnail and you can come set those new colors very easily there. All right, so very easy to use that one. So that's option number 6. So option number 5 looks like this. Let's expand this. Starting at the top, again, we have some text. We have first name, last name, year text here. Then we have some foreground objects that are going to overlay the subject. Again, this is designed to be, pretty funky looking. So a lot of these shapes are meant to overlay the subject on some of the options. If we drop on down, here's all of our layers clipped to our subject. Subject has a mask, so let's go ahead and expand this. We'll turn our subject on. And you can see the mask is set to cut off at the bottom part of this shape right here to leave room for all this text. And you can see these are these foreground shapes that's creating those transparent layered looks. Again, I think it looks really cool. But some it is a busy design, but it's intentionally busy. Again, all these are shape layers, so you could come in and set these, very easily just by picking colors. Let's take our text. If I wanted to grab all these at once, make this black. Well, let me change my background because I thought that looked kind of cool black too, based on the uniform. So there we go. But all of these shapes, these gold shapes and everything, all can be changed colors based on, again, whatever colors you'd like to use. So again, lots of shapes, and then usually nestled in or in front is the subject with its layers. And you can see these subject layers are the same. This make black and white is actually turned on just to desaturate my subject in this one a little bit, and that's because the opacity is turned down. You could crank this right back up to 100, and again, you could turn these brightness, contrast, and it just looks so much cooler with that punchy black and white in there. But again, those are all options within there. Let's turn that contrast back down because I think that looks pretty cool in this one. And then there's that highlight control. It's just toning those highlights down. All right, so there's option 5. Option 4 is like this one. Let's expand it so we have some more shapes. But it is starting out with everything clipped right here on the top part of this one to our subject layer. So let's go ahead and turn a subject on. So there's our subject on this one. And let's turn these off. We'll take a look at what each one's doing here. So first thing that we have is making our black and white adjustment. And here's our brightness contrast adjustment. So giving us that brightness and contrast. There's another one to make it even punchier. Again, just because I think it looks cool. Here's our highlight control, doing the same thing as those other ones. So toning those highlights down, adding a little bit of color. And then there's a couple of overlays on this one. So you can see you got this orange circle. It's actually clipped to the subject to do that color overlay cut into the subject there. There's another one of another color, again, just to make this cool, funky looking image here, which again, I think looks super cool. So below the subject group, we have some text layers. So again, easiest way to see what's what is, text is easy to see because you can read that. But for your shapes, you can just turn those off and on and see what each of those are doing. Once again, these are all just, come in, pick whatever color that you want. Very easy to set up and change. And then all the way down, once again, to the background layer, which again is another easy, simple change. All right, so there's that one. And moving on to option 3. I like this one because it's a really nice, simple one, but still has that funky look to it. So starting right here, we have some text layers. So just have like a last name kind of thing over here to the side. Jersey number down here. Again, those could be whatever you want them to be. And then some overlays, which you'll see when we turn our subject on here. These little kind of circle, splattery almost type of shapes, a little bit of a funky shape going on there. Those are layered here, but then I just have a simple color overlay here, so you could set those very easily as well. Another overlay block here, and then we run into, you see, our subject with all these layers clipped to our subject, so just as the other groups. So let's go in here, turn our subject on, and you can see you could size this to be feet in. I actually think this one looks cool even with no shadowing or anything under the feet. But you could make your subject bigger and kind of fade, the legs out that way. That would also work, no problem. And this is where you can see what those overlays are doing. So there's that red block that's creating that red transparency. And then above that, that green block. But again, all these can be changed. If you wanted to make that a brighter color in there, you can see even though we picked orange, it's going yellow because this is set to a hard light blending mode. Okay, so you could always change these to like overlay or soft light or vivid light or anything. I think the hard light looks pretty cool. So a lot of times with hard light, all you really need to do is darken these colors to get them, a little more saturated and to show up like you'd like. Okay, so that's the thing about hard light. All right, but easily you can change those as well. Let's set that back here. So same thing with our subject layer. There's our highlight control. That's just toning everything because I have the background toned down a little bit for this to really stand out. There's our brightness contrast that looks really cool with the black and white, and there's our black and white conversion. So you can see subject with before and after. All right. Below that, there's the block that's overlaying the text. There's the text. There's some more of these circle splatter shapes with some colors on those, and then the background color right here. All right, so let's shut this one down, and now we're on to option 2. So option 2 is a very funky one. So it's going to start with some text right here in the front. Then we have a bunch of these color overlay blocks, which are doing some transparencies and things. Some are going to overlay the subject, some will not. So again, the best way to figure these out is just kind of click them on and off, and you can see what's turning on and off there. Again, you can come through and you can pick different colors and things based on whatever you're looking to do, really. So we could change this one. Again, these also, this one's set to a linear burn. So just kind of be aware that some of these blend modes are set a little bit differently to give different overlaying transparency effects. So sometimes, even though you're not picking, you might be putting in one color and it's not that exact color. That's because of the blend mode. So sometimes all you need to do is tweak either the contrast, or, the saturation or the brightness to get the actual color that you want out of that. Coming on down here, there's our subject group. Here's a lot of those same layers that we've seen. Let's turn our subject on. So again, I think these look very cool in black and white against all of this color. I think they really pop. Now the one difference in this one, we have our black and white, we have our brightness contrast layers. This one actually has a color cast, a shadow color cast attached to it to give it that greenish type tone in the shadows. So that's one different one in this option here. So we have some more text, then we got some background textures and things happening, more shapes that you could change the colors of. So if we wanted to make that red, we could come in and do that, you know, very simply. More shapes, more shapes, more shapes. We have this rectangle that's in the back there that has its own texture attached to it. And then an overall background texture. So a lot of layering happening in these. And then our background color. So there's option 2. And finally, option 1 is another cool, funky one like this. A lot of color and shapes in it. So some text layers. Then we have a rectangle over here. It's got some texture applied to it. That's doing some transparency. Set to a hard light blend mode. We got some more shapes. Again, this one's linear light, so different shapes with different blend modes to create different transparencies. This one's set to a pin light here. So just these shapes in the foreground, you can see they're kind of masked to create some different patterns. And then subject on this one, let's turn our subject on. And for this one, I just am making the color and the contrast punchier. And then you could make that a black and white as well. So the black and white looks cool, but I think all the funky colors look cool with a color one on this one. So those are attached to the subject layer there. Then we have some texture overlay happening in the background to add some layering in there with some more shapes, more texture. This is the side text over here set to run vertically. Some gradients and things happening in the background, more shapes, more texture. So you can see lots of layers in this one, and then an overall background layer, which is going to affect everything based on the color that's set. Okay, so tons of layers in this one. Most of them are shape layers just to create some funky patterns and really like anti-patterns in a lot of it because it's meant to be very funky and disjointed to create the look that it has. But I hope that you do find some use for some of these, and I really am excited to see how people use this one because I think there could be some really fun images made using these. And yeah, so be sure to share. Always like to see what you're doing and what you're making, and I will see you on the next video.